We need to figure out why you are really good. So a good coach understands that you have to know a little bit about this, a little bit about that, a little bit of this, and a little bit about that. What's my joint structure like? What's my fiber type like? What's the stiffness like? What's my coordination like? We are going to move in ways that are determined and governed by the things that we are moving.
When it comes to speed, Stuart McMillan is the best there is. 30 years spent guiding some of the world's most elite high performers have rewarded Stu with many life lessons that today he shares on mind-body attention, intention, and connection, as well as the importance of focus, mindset, and knowing how to push hard, but also flow with ease.
If you're thinking your way through a 100-meter race or a 200-meter race,
done.
you're finished. There's just no time for it. Can you just let it go and be peaceful and then just run free or bounce the rest of the way? It's very few and far between where the truly elite athletes are also the truly elite coaches.
What are some of the common mistakes that coaches make? Before we sprint forward, a quick, easy ask. It turns out that actually 70 to 80% of you who watch my videos are strangely not subscribed to this channel. So if you enjoy this video or have received value from this channel in the past, it would mean a lot if you could take a quick second to click the subscribe button below. So thanks for that, and on to the episode. Sprinters are a different breed.
They are.
Why are they so different? I'm just reflecting on like my experience in swimming and knowing, there's just a joke like, well, the sprinters, like that's just a different kind of human animal over there. They always have a unique relationship with the conditioning part of training and tend to be free spirits, and also people who also seem to always have a better sense of what's right for them that often conflicts with traditional modalities of training. And I'm talking about like my experience way back, in the late 80s and 90s. And it would appear that this translates into this isn't just a swimming thing, like this is a sprinter thing. Is that your experience? Or
the sprinters say the same thing about the distance athletes. Like, what is it with those weirdos?
But I think of distance athletes as more robotic, and I think they're more open to following direction than sprinters are. Is that your experience or no?
I think that's probably changed a little bit over the course of time. I feel like now we're so influenced by the NCAA, where you're doing exactly what your leader tells you to do, whether you like it or not. That now is embedded within the entirety of the system. And sprinters and jumpers and throwers and distance athletes are much more automatic, much more, I'm just going to do what you tell me, coach. There's a little bit less pushback.
It sounds like you're saying that from a negative perspective, like that's 100%. Not necessarily a good thing.
No, 100%. Yeah, for sure.
Sprinters are also performance artists. Like there's a showmanship to sprinting that doesn't translate to the longer distances or to necessarily different disciplines. I mean, when you see Noah Wiles make his entrance into the stadium with the wardrobe and the suitcase and Snoop Dogg and the pearls in the hair, and then, the whole routine before he gets behind the starting blocks, the Pokemon card, like the whole, it's theater. Yeah. It's incredible, right? You don't see this with athletes lining up to run a 50-kilometer trail race, But it gets the audience so engaged and so enthusiastic about this event that is perhaps the most indelible in sport. Like, who is the fastest man? Who is the fastest woman?
I don't agree.
You don't?
No, I don't. I think it used to be that way. I think that's a bit of a myth now. I think a vast majority of the elite sprinters, male and female, are really boring. Really boring. But we see Noah Lyles and Sha'Carri Richardson.
And we translate that.
And we translate that to everybody else.
Everybody.
If you look at the 100-meter final in Paris last year, you've got one guy who's jumping around like a crazy man.
Yeah.
And 7 people are standing like this.
That is true.
Right?
That is true.
And that's the history. And then going back every Olympiad. You got Usain who's doing this and just playing around and being really playful, and 7 others who are standing like this. And they don't have, honestly, most sprinters are pretty laid back, like really chill people, whether it be male or female. And then you've got the odd person like a Usain or now like a Noah. Like Noah, I don't think Noah's being exactly inauthentic.
No,
But
no, not at all.
No, but I think he sees that one of his responsibilities of being, the fastest man in the world is how can I raise up this sport? How can I bring more eyes onto this sport? So he, maybe he goes a little bit overboard with some of the things he does, like the Snoop Dogg and the case and the Pokemon and all that sort of thing. It's still authentically him. But I think he's got a little bit of a different objective where everybody else is just, I'm here just to race. I don't care about the sport. That's not my responsibility. And they're just being them. And in my experience, like most people are just really calm. And there's 2 exceptions. Just Sha'Carri and Noah.
Who capture all of the attention. Yeah. To be Sherry or Noah, you have to have a certain level of like self-confidence and self-belief. Like there is an ego to like the audacity to put yourself, out there in that way. And yet there's no way that you can compete at that level, at the highest level, without a healthy dose of humility. Like you have to be humble and present and all of these things. Like there is a yin yang to sport and sprinting in particular, like being entirely present while also being aware of how you're representing the sport and what this, kind of celebration around speed means to the world.
I think it's a difficult one for many of the athletes. It's a difficult sort of line to navigate. This where they have to, it's for me, and I say this to the athletes I coach all the time, this is the hardest thing about this sport and why I love this sport so much. Because you cannot show up in the sport and just be at 99% and just, push as hard as you possibly can minus 1%, but relaxed and fluid and rhythmical. You have to have maximum ferocity and maximum fluidity. And and if you don't, you've got no shot.
Yeah.
No shot.
Yeah.
And that's the case with every event, every sport almost.
Except
but in
that
this one,
the margin of error
seconds.
is 0.
Right.
Right.
Zero
so everything is
error.
heightened.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. So it's only those that are so confident in their capacity to do this at the highest level, with maximum level of arousal, with 1 billion people watching them. Those are the people that win.
Yeah. That tension, that yin yang, like you have to output to the best of your ability, put the push part, right? But your best performances are going to be in that state of easiness, like ease and flow and fluidity, and how do you balance those two things? It's an alchemy.
100%. I mean, across the board, they say after the best performances, how did that feel? I don't know. 100% of the time. I don't know how that felt. Or you ask them about how they felt or what they were thinking about in their best performances. I don't really know.
Because
how do you coach that?
You have to coach presence, right?
Yeah.
They don't know because they were so present in the experience. Yeah.
A little bit easier said than done.
Yeah. Which also, that's also why some of the best athletes make for the worst interviews and podcast guests, because they don't necessarily know how to explain what they do or how they do it. And they're doers.
And they often make for the worst coaches.
Tell me more.
Because they know the know-how, not the know-what. They know how they did that thing. They just went out and expressed themselves maximally and did the thing that they've done 1,000 million times. They don't know what it was. They can't explain that to somebody else. Well, I just do this. What do you mean just do this? I can't do that. And it's very few and far between where the truly elite athletes are also the truly elite coaches.
What is the key or the multiple key differentiators between the absolute peak of excellence in your world and the person who's unbelievably good but is never going to take that final step?
It's what we've been talking about the last 5 or 10 minutes. It's that piece of it. Most elite athletes have very similar capacities, very similar ability to produce force fast in the right direction. Most of them are really technically, superior. It's the ones that can do that at incredibly intense levels of arousal. Those are the ones. That's the separator. And we've seen that all the time, all the time, in all sports, right? And it's such a difficult thing to train because the only opportunity they get to actually express themselves at that level of arousal is in those races that in our sport come about maybe once a year at World Championships or, even more than that, once every 4 years. So how do you train for that? Let's say, go back to that question. It's really, really hard. It's one thing saying, I want you to be present and just focus on this and, what your breath and whatever it is that we talk about, working their way through the race. But it's another thing to actually do that and be able to still express yourself maximally while you're doing it.
But your job is to deconstruct that and figure out a way to train that. Right. So how do you do that?
Yeah, I spent about 40 years trying to figure that out. If you've got an answer, please let me know. Yeah, it's great. I mean, that's the one thing about this job that I really enjoy is that balance, that yin and yang. I'm known as a bit of a technician as a coach. I think mechanics matter. I think the way that you move really matters. I think effective movement and the quality of movement is really, really important. But that's all trumped by the efficiency and the fluidity and just running and just moving and being present. So it's marrying those two things. So when we're on the track and we're in training, we're trying to get the athlete to move in as an effective way as they possibly can for them as an individual. And then what we try to do, and there might be some cueing involved in that, drive the knees forward, dorsiflex your feet, be active on the ground, something with the arms or the carriage of the head or the breath or what have you, right? We've got this long list of different internal and external cues that we use. But what we try to do is we try to attach those cues with an emotion. And over the course of time, because if you're thinking your way through a 100-meter race or a 200-meter race,
done.
You're finished. Yeah. You're finished. There's just no time for it. But if you can just connect with the emotion, and if we've, in training, connected that emotion with all this long list of cues, then those cues just sort of come along for the ride when you're thinking about that emotion. So in 100 meters, for example, the first 30 meters of it, one of the emotions we talk about is pressure. So just try to apply as much pressure as you possibly can. And that doesn't work for everybody. Sometimes it's force, sometimes it's power, sometimes it's whatever. But pressure is one that I really like. And then once you can no longer apply any more pressure, can you just let it go and be peaceful or find freedom and then just run free or bounce the rest of the way? So you've got these emotions, these mood words that you can connect to. And then this laundry list of technical instructions just come along for the ride.
The technique has to be so internalized and so remote that it doesn't involve thought processes, but can be triggered by that cue, that emotional cue. That's interesting. It's sort of like an actor going off book, an actor who has trained for many years with technique and then reads the script and rehearses it a million times so they don't have to think about what the words are. And then on stage or on camera, it's like the cue is pressure or whatever. And the body just sort of adapts that stance.
The human system's a self-organizing system. And, when I reach over here to pick up this, I'm not thinking about what I'm doing with my arm and my fingers and grasping it. I just do that. It's the same thing with sprinting or any movement. You're just thinking about the outcome of that movement. And you find your body just self-organizes into the most efficient way to do it. So that's what I mean. Like efficiency is the key. But that doesn't mean that there's no rules. You still have to do it with an effective technique. So it's always marrying those two things.
Your background is super interesting because you were an athlete, you played soccer and you were a sprinter, but you went to art school and you were a DJ, you had a radio show. And when I think of that, I think, well, this guy, is stepping into this world as an artist. Like your medium are these young people, right? That you're shaping and they're your canvas. Like you're taking this very artistic approach to how do I take this person, this talented athlete, and, dial it up and tune it in so that they can, do their performance art.
100%.
It's pretty cool.
It took me quite a long time to start thinking of it that way. I think when I started coaching, and by the way, you said I was a sprinter. I was not a sprinter. I was a really, really bad sprinter.
Okay.
So if anybody's listening that knew me back then,
I assure you, you're probably faster than most people, but
I was terrible. I was a pretty good soccer player. I was really, when I started, my dad's a civil engineer, and I'm very structured. My brain sort of works that way as well. So I was very much about, this needs to make sense. It's all linear. It's this, and then it's that, and then it's this, and then it's that, and then this and that. So you've got this periodized program over the course of, like it's a math problem. And it took me probably a couple decades to figure out, human beings are not math problems. They're human beings, And here's an opportunity now to flex those creative muscles that I do have. Like I was an artist. I did go to art school. I DJ'd for 25, 30 years. And I feel like that's whatever success that I've had, it's been because of the marrying of those two things. That the scientific part of me, the structured part of me, the linear thought processes, but also my capacity to understand this is a non-linear thing. These are non-linear complex systems that we're dealing with, and we've got to respect that.
There is engineering involved, but it's not an engineering problem.
100%.
Otherwise, you could just give people a program and you could predict the result, and the result would track every time.
And how boring would that be?
I know.
Like people,
but also probably frustrating at times too.
Oh, for sure. Like a lot of coaches say, man, wouldn't it be so great if that's what it was? I would say no.
Yeah.
Why would that be great?
AI would replace you quickly.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I love the creative aspect to this. It's a puzzle. Every athlete's a puzzle. The interaction is a puzzle. Everything that we're working on is a puzzle. And it's our job to know what's the most important puzzle for us today to try to solve.
Beyond the technique side of things and the conditioning side of things, what is the most challenging and interesting puzzle when it comes to deconstructing the athlete and trying to figure out what makes them tick so that you can guide them in a language that they can hear and adhere to?
So I own this company called Altus, and our head coach, his name's Dan Paff. You may know Dan, I've heard of Dan. He's a very legendary track and field coach. He's in his 70s.
Your mentor, yeah.
He's my mentor. I met him in the mid-90s. And I met him in 1995. He was coaching one of my best friends at the time, Donovan Bailey. Still is one of my best friends. I asked Dan, what is the key to being a great coach? What is it that makes you really good at what you're doing? And he says, well, it's understanding that coaching is more about just this biomechanics or the physiology or the psychology or the nutrition. It's all of that. And more than all of that, it's understanding how all of these things interact in space and time. So a good coach understands that you have to know a little bit about this, a little bit about that, a little bit of this, a little bit about that, a little bit of this, and a little bit about that. So for me, I've taken that throughout my entirety of my career now. And at the start of every year, we sit down with the athletes and we explain what the health and performance system looks like. And we ask them, and we try to get the athletes to lead this. And I say, Rich, first we talk about what the objective is. What are you trying to get done this year? And then how are you going to do that? And typically they say, well, we're going to train a certain way. We'll train hard, or we do whatever, and we'll talk about training. So yeah, great, perfect. What else are you going to have to do? Well, we're probably going to have to recover from the training. And what does that mean? Well, it means we have to sleep, and we have to maybe get some massage, and so on and so forth. Great. What else do you have to do? And then after some thought, maybe they'll come up with, well, we probably have to fuel well. What does that mean? Well, we have to eat good food and good timing and blah, blah, blah. I say, yeah, perfect. And what else is there? What else is maybe going to constrain your ability to reach this objective? Well, maybe, and most of them can get this one as well. Well, maybe it's something to do with my psychology, my mental resilience. Great. Then what else? Is there anything else in this big health and performance system that we have to try to navigate over the course of this year? And many of them say, well, it's good that maybe I've got some social support, my friends and my family, and I'm doing some things outside of the track. I say, great, perfect. So that gives us 5 things to work on. So we have these 5 things in the health and performance system that we start, and we rank, and the athletes actually rank out of 10 where they feel they sit on each of these component parts of the system. And if they say, well, right now I'm about a 7 out of 10 on physical, I'm about 6 out of 10 on the nutrition and the food, I'm a 9 out of 10 on my recovery and regeneration. My mental resiliency is great. I'm a 10 out of 10 on that. And I've got a great familial support, and I've got great friends, and so on and so forth. And that gives us a ranking, like a hierarchical ranking of all the things that we feel are important. And then we break those pieces down. And where within this then, can we improve? What is it about your food or your fueling or your recovery, regeneration, what have you, that we can make the most changes right now that's going to help you? So this becomes the puzzle. And this is one of the rules of complex systems. Any attempt to optimize a single part of a complex system comes at the expense of the entirety of the system as a whole. We see that all the time, where athletes over-focus on one piece of the system. And because of that, it pulls the entire system kind of out of whack a little bit, and they forget about these other pieces that are also really important. So our objective is always, can you be an 8 out of 10 on all things? And once you're that, all right, can we be an 8.5? Can we be a 9? Can we be a 9.5? Understanding that we're never going to optimize any one single thing. But that gives us not only an outline and a structure to the entire year, but also an outline to and a structure to every conversation that we have thereafter.
Right, and a built-in accountability system
100%.
to that. But implicit in all of that is buy-in and involvement with the athlete. Like, this is very different from, my generation as an athlete. Like, you show up, the coach tells you what to do, and you do it. And what you're sharing is very much a collaborative relationship in which you're saying to the athlete, like, you tell me, and let's work with you towards this goal that we have. Like, it's almost an inception. Like, maybe you are calling all the shots, but you're giving them.
Oh, I'm not calling the shots at all.
But like, they're, it's like, okay, you said this is what you want, and you're sharing with me, these are the ways in which you want to move forward. And so I'm here to support that. But the idea is being led by the athlete.
There's 3 big things that we talk about at the start of the year. One is we need to figure out why you are really good, and we train you towards that thing. So let's have a conversation about that. Number 2 is this is a partnership. This is me and you working together. This isn't me directing this. I'm helping, I'm guiding you, I'm facilitating this, but this is always going to be an ongoing conversation. And number 3 is what you alluded to, which is the most important thing, is you need to believe 100% in yourself, everything you do, your support team, all the things that are around this, and me as your coach in the program that you're buying into. Without those 3 things, you're not going to reach these objectives. So it's 100%. Like that for me is everything. Now, that's a little bit different if I'm coaching 14-year-olds. 14-year-olds is not a 50-50 partnership. It's probably a 98-2. It's still, they're going to have some autonomy into some of the things that we do. I think that's still important. But it's not 50-50. But the more experience that we have with the athletes, and maybe I'm starting with a 20-year-old. I coached a bobsledder named Steve Messler, a 3-time Olympian, ended up winning a gold medal in 2010. And at the start of the program in 2001, I was a different coach. I mean, it's a long time ago. I'm a director. I'm telling him exactly what to do. 10 years later, he's telling me exactly what he's going to do. And he won an Olympic gold medal. That's really, truly, that should be the nature of a coach-athlete relationship over the course of time.
So under this rubric, what are the characteristics of the athlete that thrives in that type of environment and the ones that struggle?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've actually struggled with this as well, because I don't like coaching automatons that just want to be told what to do. Like, I don't find that, I can see what they can't see, but they can feel what I can't feel. So that back and forth is really important for me. So when I'm coaching athletes that just want to be told what to do, typically that doesn't work for me. I coached a really, really elite sprinter who's now got 7 Olympic medals. And he was that way. He just wanted to be told what to do. He wasn't interested in the system or what he needed to know or do to have a long-term sustainable career. And I only coached him for 3 years because of that. Now, he's had a long-term sustainable career because he's found out over the course of time, this is important, and I need to ask these questions and be a better actor or partner in this relationship. But I find that really, really, really hard. When I'm talking to athletes that I may be entering into a new relationship with, I make sure that they're on that same boat. Is this something that you're also interested in? Or are you just interested in being told what to do? Because you can succeed both ways. If you are only interested in being told what to do, that doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to succeed. There's plenty of people that succeed that way. It's just not going to succeed with me.
Yeah. In your experience, what are some of the common mistakes that coaches make?
Oh boy.
I asked that intentionally in the broadest of ways.
Yeah.
I just feel I would say, as a preface to that, like, coaching philosophy has come a long way, and it seems to me you don't see like the bad behavior coaches in the way that you used to, but that doesn't mean that everybody understands how to coach at the level that you're coaching.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think it has come a long way. And I think it has come a long way, especially in collegiate ranks. And maybe Europe and other places. I mean, there's some really good coaching going on, for sure, in all sports. I feel like there's probably 2 or 3 really significant things that I think coaching as a whole, and coaches as a whole, can do significantly better. One of it is this: stop being a director and start thinking of your role as being a guide or facilitator. And coaching, especially in this country, has always been, the coach is an authority figure, and there's no autonomy for the athlete. And that can work, and it does work, especially in the NCAA. You've got quite a lot of, directors in the NCAA that just tell you what to do. And for short term, that can definitely work. But long term, I don't feel that works well. Meaning, you may succeed that way, but I don't think that's really setting you up to be having a healthy relationship with the sport, enjoying your experience in the sport, maybe even enjoying your life. I feel like that is really, really important. And I think a lot of coaches don't understand that. A coach often sees their role as, all right, I'm coaching you, Rich. I want you to win. Mm-hmm. And that's it. And forgetting, and maybe even ignoring that, maybe that's not what you exactly want from your experience in sport. Winning might be important to you, but maybe spending time with friends might be just as important. Or finding out more about yourself through this expression of sprinting or jumping or throwing or whatever might be more important. Or traveling might be more important. All of these different things. So I feel like coaches can do a better job of having these conversations with athletes and trying to understand what it is that they are trying to get out of this thing that they're doing, so we can support that. That's our role. Rather than telling you what's important to me and just assuming that's important to you as well. Mm-hmm. So number 1 is that. Number 2, I think, is from a technical perspective, and we see this across the board, on all sports, at all levels, especially at the professional level, is coaches coaching athletes as if they are the average of all the athletes that they coach. So not coaching individuals, coaching the average of all the individuals. So whether that being from a technical perspective, a programming perspective, a mental resilience and emotional psychological perspective, not treating the person as an individual, I think, is the biggest error that I see in all coaching across the board. So those are probably the 2 biggest things for me.
That's a scalability problem, though, because not everybody can have their own coach and program tailored specifically for them.
For sure, I agree with that. If you're coaching, say, a soccer team, you've got 25 players, you can't have 25 separate programs for 25 players. But you can still talk to them about what is important to them and treat them a little bit differently, especially at professional levels. And we don't do that well at all. Mm-hmm. Like there's some of the best coaches in the world, that they do a really bad job of that. If you either fit into the system or you go find another system to fit into. And I find, at least in my experience, my opinion, that's not what coaching is. Coaching is now, like, if I've got 25 players, 20 of them might work pretty well with this system. And 5 of them, I'm going to have to figure out a way to get the best out of those 5. That's the objective. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's not about, all right, get rid of those 5 and bring in another 5. Yeah. That's the biggest issue I have with so many people who've, whether it be Instagram experts or whatever, saying this is how you get better at this thing technically.
Yeah.
Well, how do you know?
I was going to ask you about how you navigate the landscape of, online, not necessarily misinformation, but maybe not the best information when it comes to stuff that you actually know about.
I try my best to ignore it. I really do. Like, if I see something, oh man, like, I don't like how you're doing this, I block that person and mute that person so I'd never see it again.
You have to deal with it.
I've had this conversation with a number of colleagues about whether it's the responsibility for coaches and coach educators to not only point people towards good things, but also point them away from bad things. Uh-huh. And that's tricky, because that's a slippery slope when you start doing that. What is a bad thing even? And who am I to even say that that's a bad thing? So I tend to just focus on the positive side. This is what I feel is important. If you don't, that's okay.
Yeah. I'm just thinking of Steve Magnus. He goes, face first into a lot of these things.
Yeah.
And God bless him.
Yeah.
That front line is not for everyone.
No, it's not. It's not. I'm not interested in it. But great, Steve. I love that you're doing it.
In many cases, you or someone like you who is in, a role similar to the role that you play, you're the most important adult figure in these young people's lives, maybe in certain cases more important than their parents. And so there is a role that you're playing and a responsibility perhaps that you're shouldering to mold these athletes as human beings and as people. Like, do you think about that? Do you have a philosophy around that? Because off the track, like, your influence is carrying into the rest of their lives.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting. I used to be really clear on this, that my responsibility begun and ended with the physical piece or the health and performance piece. And that was it. But you're right. I mean, it's probably more than that.
That's convenient to tell yourself that.
100%. And it's a much easier job.
Yeah.
It's still a really, really difficult job, by the way. I'm educated as a coach. I'm not educated as a life coach or a mentor for young people. So they're dealing with things that, that's not my scope of practice here. I can be a good role model. I can have conversations with you, and I can be supportive and try to create an environment in which you're a part of and training within that is positive and you can feel supported and great within. But I think, it's really challenging for a coach also to have a significant amount of responsibility on the other 130 hours a week that we're not seeing. It's hard.
But mindset is such a big piece of this.
Yeah.
And however you're carrying that message or trying to, instill the best mindset possible for them to perform at that level, that's something that is crucial throughout the rest of their life, and that those people will turn to and rely upon in their decision making throughout the course of the rest of their life.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's you think about it that way and it's like too much, but
it's true. It is the job, right?
It is true.
For sure.
And so obviously you're teaching them, important life skills in addition to, track and field skills or sprinting skills.
And I think it's even difficult to disentangle their identity as an athlete and them as a human being. Anybody who's a master of what they do, there's a lot of crossover there, I don't know how recent this was. There was an interview with the coach of the Boston Celtics, and I'm blanking on his name. And the interviewer said, "You're a basketball coach," and then went to ask his question. And I think his name's Joe. I don't remember his last name. But he interrupted the interviewer and said, "I'm not a basketball coach." And he said, "I'm a human being who coaches basketball." And he talked about this separation. It was actually a really intelligent, well thought through answer. But I feel like, you're a basketball coach. Like, your identity is so entangled within being a basketball coach that it's really hard for you to disentangle that. That is it. I'm a coach. I'm a track and field coach and a coach educator. And these athletes at this level are track and field athletes. And their identity as an athlete is so tied in with their identity as a human that can become problematic. And sometimes it's a coach's role to better understand when that is becoming problematic and help the athlete disentangle that they go out and lose a race and they've just, that ruins, their next week. It's just a race, man.
Sure.
It's okay.
These are attachments, right?
Yeah.
Your attachment to your identity as an athlete, your attachment to achieving a certain goal. And on some level, these are helpful, to anchor yourself in who you are and what you're striving towards, but they become unhealthy when you don't reach that goal and it's a threat to that identity, like who you are as a human being, as opposed to something you just did or didn't do. It's back to the push and the pull, right?
Right.
Like
and
you have to, as hard as you have to push, you have to, in equal parts release.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also accepting that there's something inherently unhealthy about being the best in the world at almost anything.
Yeah, you said that. I mean? Like, you had some tweet or something like, this shouldn't be a controversial statement that like being an athlete at this level might not be the healthiest thing for people to do.
It's not.
So tell me more about that.
It's an obsession. You have to be obsessed by it. It's easy to say that you've got to disconnect and be balanced. But how do you do that when it is your obsession? And part of you being really good at this is because you are obsessed by it.
As we all dive into our 2025 health goals, there's something crucial we often overlook, and that is proper hydration. And here's the thing, it's not just about drinking more water, it's about maintaining the right balance of water and minerals. And by minerals, I mean electrolytes. And what's fascinating is that drinking too much plain water can actually be counterproductive by diluting your electrolyte levels and leading to things like fatigue, headaches, and muscle cramps. And that's why I'm excited about Element, a zero sugar electrolyte drink mix with the perfect balance of sodium, potassium, and magnesium, and my workout go-to. What I appreciate about Element is its science-based approach to hydration. They've created something that's both effective but also delicious, whether you're mixing their citrus salt with water or adding chocolate salt to your morning coffee, which may sound weird, but is actually weirdly delicious. You can now get a free Element sample pack with any purchase. Just visit drinklmnt.com/richroll. We're brought to you today by Bon Charge. Now, it's fair to say that I've subjected my skin to a lifetime of harsh treatment, thousands of hours in overly chlorinated indoor pools, and pretty much almost no concern for skincare. And I would say it wasn't until I was about in my mid-50s that I started doing what I should have done all along, which is taking care of my body's largest organ. This shift led me to the incredible product line from Bon Charge, most notably their red light face mask. Their red and near infrared light is designed to rejuvenate your skin at a cellular level. It's completely non-invasive. Just 10 minutes is all it requires a day. The design is incredibly thoughtful. There's no cord, it's comfortable, and it's slim enough for easy travel. There's just nothing elaborate about it. Just science-backed wellness made accessible at home. So check it out. Go to boncharge.com/richroll and use coupon code richroll to save 15%. Yeah, you're not winning an Olympic gold medal because you're living a balanced life.
No, you're not. You're not.
Yeah.
You've got another 80 years to live a balanced life, after that. Now, I'm not saying that balance isn't important. We talk about it, as I said before, this 5-component part health and performance system, that there needs to be some sort of dynamic balance between all of these component parts. And within that is included the community that you're a part of and your friends and family, and you feel supported. It's really important. But it's also really important not only to be healthy human, but understanding that being a healthy human, if you're not, it's constraining your ability to actually perform.
Yeah. Also, the tension between what serves the short-term goal and what serves the long-term goal.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it goes back to what the athlete's objective is. Are you in this is it short-term for you? Are you trying to win an Olympic medal? Or are there other objectives? And what does the hierarchical list look like for you? Like, not everybody's doing the sport to win the Olympics, as you know. So what is it? And we have to understand that, and then we support that. And for those that may, I just want to have some friends, I want to compete, I want to find out more about myself, I want to travel, I want to do this, great. We can support that too.
When you're an athlete at that high level, does anybody say that?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I just assume they all are like, I'm going to the Olympics.
Oh, no.
You're the guy who's going to take me there.
That's the story that they've been told since they were 5, right? And then they see it and they start living it. Say, okay, is this really what I want? When they start doing the work to try to figure out their motivation, like why are they still doing this thing rather than just doing this thing because they were the best in school at it. And they start asking themselves these more existential questions. And then it isn't that. It's this, and this instead. And many of them are forced to ask those questions because they're just miserable. They're not enjoying it anymore.
Yeah.
They got into the sport because they enjoyed it. Now they're doing it because they want to go to the Olympics. Not everybody wants to go to the Olympics.
You have said that sprinting is the ultimate human activity. So justify that statement.
Okay, so I'll ask you, do you know of any single metric that is a better measure for overall health and vitality than the ability to go out and maximally run? To be able to run maximally, like go out on the street right now, and after a 10-minute warm-up, you can run as fast as you can.
Probably not.
I don't think there is. It's a proxy for so many other different things. If you can do that, you can move your body in so many different ways. and you can explore the world in so many different ways. So for me, that's why I feel like it's the ultimate activity. You don't have to sprint. It's not like, okay, you've got to start a sprinting program now and sprint 5 days a week. It's not that. It's, can you do it? Do you still have the capacity to do it? Most of us lose that capacity at 15, 20, 25 maybe.
Yeah.
You know?
So this is the answer to the next question, I guess, on some level, which is like, you're a sprint coach. Like, my audience is full of average people, many of whom are probably not interested in sprinting at all. Like, why should we care about this? Like, why should we care about understanding sprinting?
I think you should care about being free to move your body in as many different ways as you want to, and not being constrained by a body that cannot do those things. And I feel like that's really important. You have that freedom when you're young. And then we start losing that freedom, and we start being dictated to by a commodified fitness industry about what health and wellness and movement is about. And then 10 years later, we can no longer move in free ways and express ourselves with freedom. And that's a very slippery slope to not being able to move well at all. So I feel like it's not about sprinting. It's just about exploring, moving your body in as many different ways as you possibly can. That's it's the key to long-term health and wellness, variability and adaptability.
What is the difference between sprinting and running? And even more than that, the difference between sprinting and running fast?
Let's zoom out, and let's say the difference between sprinting and running from a health perspective. Most people who are listening do some sort of running or jogging. And short term, that's a pretty safe activity. It's one of the reasons why we do it. And long term, maybe not really safe. We know the statistics around health of running and jogging. Between 40 and 60% of all runners hurt every single year. That's pretty high. Sprinting's the opposite. Short term, acutely, there's some danger there. There's some significant risk. But long term, there's some really, really big upsides. So from that perspective, I feel, okay, that's one way to describe the differences. Why is that? Because sprinting, you're applying far more forces through greater ranges of motion, much faster. It requires much more coordination through the entirety of the system. Where jogging is nowhere near as much force, nowhere near as much velocity, nowhere near as much range of motion. And instead of having to coordinate through the entire system, we just have to basically coordinate through the foot and ankle and the calf complex, and that's it. And the rest of the body just goes along for the ride. By the way, I'm not down on jogging. I jog. I run every day. I feel like it's really, if you enjoy it, it's good for you. It feeds your soul, and you can remain healthy. Go and run. But I feel like you also need to sprint.
From a biomechanical perspective, though, there is more difference than I think people would realize between running fast and what would technically be called sprinting.
Yeah. It always, some of it's semantics, like I get annoyed, and that's just me, being annoyed for no reason really by the pop scientists espousing a certain protocol to say sprint for 60 seconds and then take 60 seconds off. No one on the planet.
The derivative ultimate workout.
Right.
This is all you need to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Nobody on the planet is sprinting for 60 seconds.
That would bother you.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Or even 20 seconds. You're not sprinting. You're jogging. Or you're running fast. Or you're running as fast as you can. So there's the biggest difference is like the basic one, away from being just semantics, is the amount of time, space that you're taking up in the world. Like sprinting, you're taking up much more space. Like it's just bigger range of motion. As I said, it's much more force and much more velocity. For me, the biggest thing or the most important thing, sprinting is a coordinative activity, a full body coordination, where running is a little less coordination because you're spending much more time on the ground. So it's not as important how you coordinate what's going on at the foot and ankle, what's going on at the knee, and what's going on at the hip. But for sprinting, that's really important. So that's the main sort of non-semantical or sort of less scientific reason. If you want to call it sprinting, go ahead and call it sprinting. Running as fast as you can. If you want to call that sprinting, you can call it sprinting. I'm not going to get annoyed anymore at that. But the one thing that the elite sprinters do that no one else can do is they create this negative foot speed. So meaning the foot is coming back underneath the center mass, almost faster than the horizontal velocity of the center mass. So the center mass is moving horizontally, and you're moving the foot back at that same velocity, and you're creating the secondary mass. It's called the two-mass model. It's developed by a friend of mine named Dr. Ken Clark. And the elite sprinters are able to create the secondary mass of up to about 10% of the total ground reaction forces. That's sprinting. That is one model, the two-mass model, that's available to less than 0.001% of the population. Everyone else, including me and you, have what's called a spring mass model, where we just hit the ground like a spring and we just spring off. We hit the ground like a spring, we just spring off. There's no secondary mass. So the most that we can get out of our system is about 90% of it. That's it.
And is that rare version something that can be taught?
I wish it was.
This is a gift. Like, this is a gift.
It's one of those things where if you don't have the capacity to do that, good luck.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard. The ability to time the impact and it's not a capacity thing. It's not you just got to get a little bit stronger or work on the velocity of your foot as it comes back. It's a coordination thing. It involves the timing of the impact into the ground that happens in thousandths of a second. It's so hard. It's something that Noah Lyles does better than everybody else on the planet, and that's why he's the fastest man. But it's something that a guy that can run 9.9 doesn't do as well as he does. It is the differentiating factor in elite sprinting.
The difference between really good and the best.
Correct.
And that gap will never be bridged through conditioning and technique.
It's really hard, really hard. But we try.
Just like a drummer with timing or, a singer with a certain pitch. These things are just things that certain people come into the world with. You can get better at
them, right? I mean, you can drum better. Your rhythm can get better. If you can't dance.
But fundamentally, it's one of those things like, that woman or that guy has it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You can either dance or you can't. And if you can't dance, you can become a better dancer. But you're not ever going to have the coordination of the rhythm that a great dancer has, or a singer, or a drummer.
When you were on Huberman the other week, he opened it up by talking a little bit about you guys being out at the Malibu High School track and you being able to identify, a kid across the track who, kind of stood out. Like, oh, that guy has something these other kids don't.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he had that very special thing, but just an innate kind of predisposition for this type of activity. Yeah.
It's pretty obvious pretty immediately. We had a kid from high school actually join us last year for an athlete that we used to coach. His friend had a kid that wanted to know whether he had a future as a sprinter or a football player. So they asked us to have a look at him for a week and basically give them some advice on whether he should be a sprinter in the NCAA or should he go down the football route. And he came out, and his name's Jeb Moon, and he's so coordinated. Like, his rhythm and his timing is beautiful. He just bounces off the track. And he's small and skinny. So it was a pretty easy answer for me. I said, all right, this guy can definitely be a runner. I don't know if he can be a sprinter, but he has the coordination, the rhythm, and the timing to be able to do that. And then, less than a year later now, like, he's getting 30, 40 looks from NCAA programs because he's gone all in on the running part. He's going to be an elite 800-meter guy. And it was clear immediately. You just watch him run down the track, and you'll see it. You go to any track meet, you go to a marathon. You'll see the guys and the girls at the start of the marathon and just bounce for 26 miles. And the ones at the end, it just looks like a slog. I mean, there's a massive difference. And it's not only capacity. Capacity is important. But most of the difference that we see, the aesthetic differences we see is just, people watching, is that coordinative factor, that coordination, the rhythm and the timing. They've just got something that is so hard to coach, so hard to improve.
And then within that, there's a whole universe in which you can counsel, teach, coach, and hone and improve technique. And there's no sport in which technique is coming into play, in such a material way as sprinting.
100%. However, you look at 8 finalists in the Olympic final. All of them, the 8
different techniques,
8 best in the world, move in 8 different ways.
And there's a wider variation in body type than you would expect.
Massive.
Like, you look at Noah Lyles and you look at Usain Bolt, they don't look like they're in the same sport.
Well, look at Christian Coleman and Usain Bolt. Christian Coleman's 5'7". Usain Bolt's 6'5". They're pretty similar performers, or were. You know, Zarnell Hughes, 6'3". Trayvon Burmell, 5'7". I mean, they're all over the shop. We are going to move in ways that are determined and governed by the things that we are moving. You know, I'm going to move differently than you. I'm a little bit skinnier than you and a little bit taller than you. Those are the obvious things that we can see. But all these other things as well. You know, what's my joint structure like? What's my fiber type like? What's my force capacity like? What's the stiffness like? What's my coordination like? All of these things govern how we move. And it's our job as coaches is to try to understand what is it unique about you that I can really understand so I can get you moving how you need to be moving, not what I feel like you should be moving. And that's the hardest thing for me.
So in the context of a typical training cycle with one of your athletes, how would it break down percentage-wise between time invested in drills and technique versus conditioning?
Everything is everything. Yeah, everything that we do, we're trying to do as technically proficient as we possibly can. So whether that's a walk around the track, whether that's a skip, whether that's a stride, whether it's a sprint, an acceleration, any sort of drill. So we don't separate, okay, we're going to warm up and now we're going to do some technical work and then we're going to do the main part of the session when we don't think about it. We think about how you move from step one to the time we get in the car. There's no separation there.
And like back to the actor thing, it's method acting.
Oh, yeah.
You're taking it home with you.
100%.
Yeah.
And again, it's different athletes are at different levels of their journey here. Some of them are technically extremely good. Like if you look at a model of what you would think is the most effective way to, make a jump shot or throw a football or sprint, yeah, that person is that. And then at that point, what are we doing? We're just encouraging and reminding and maybe putting in things that ensures that they, don't get too far away from that. But the rest of it is just trying to impact efficiency and coordination in ways where we're going to challenge that model in a different way.
You know what's really ironic about that? Obviously, there's a heightened attunement to technique in sprinting because the smallest differences are all the differences. But if you look at endurance sports like a marathon or imagine a 50 miler or a 100 miler, if you paid more attention to technique, you attuned yourself to that, that would translate into like just unbelievable gains, right? Like just life-changing amount of improvement. And yet these sports are far less attuned to technique.
It took decades for even the best coaches of middle distance athletes to figure that out. Oh, technique matters. And these are the best coaches of the best athletes in the world. They know that now. And, not all of the best middle distance coaches in the world are all in on mechanics, but most of them are at this point. In 100 meters, the fastest men take about 40 to 45 steps, and the fastest women take about 45 to 50 steps, or about 50 to 55. I don't know how many steps there are in a marathon or a 100 miler, but it's a lot.
Yeah, but like whatever tiny marginal gain that you're getting in sprinting, like if you made a technique shift and it becomes rote and intuitive and it allows you to run more efficiently or more swiftly, that translates into massive performance gains.
And health.
And yet it really is sort of an afterthought, I think, still, which is exciting because once that enters that world, you could expect to see some real leaps.
It goes back to kind of what we were saying before. What's the solution for that? There's social media coaches that say, do these drills, and that's your technical work, right? And that's going to magically make your technique better. You'll just do 5 minutes of drills before you go do your run, or 10 minutes of drills. It doesn't work that way. You get better by moving in a better way. That's the only way to do it. You actually have to make changes. Now, the tricky thing is what does that look like? Because we self-organize towards our most efficient strategy. So if we just went out and ran down the street right now, we're not thinking about it, we will run in our most efficient way. It may not be the most effective, but it is right now our most natural way to do that. So the coach's job is to look at that and say, can we improve that effectiveness without necessarily negatively impacting the efficiency of that strategy? And that's really hard. There's always going to be a gap. Improvement of effectiveness comes at the cost of efficiency, always. It's just a matter of what that cost is. Is that cost a year and a half, where you're going to be moving in a less efficient way? Or is it, if you're working with a 15-year-old kid, like a week, because it's so
the
plastic.
Neuroplasticity. Yeah. Like when Tiger Woods decided he was going to change his swing, it was like this huge commitment that didn't pay off for quite some time.
It's the greatest example in sports. He ruined his career by messing what was already an incredibly effective and efficient swing, trying to make it more effective and ignoring, not understanding how this is going to impact his efficiency. And it ruined his health, and his career hasn't been the same, obviously. Yeah.
Also, when you make that technique shift, it doesn't feel right. It feels wrong. And even if you have a coach saying, trust me, this is going to make you better, everything in your body is like, no, like I want to move this way. And now when I move this way, it just feels like the wrong way. Like I'm obviously thinking back on my swimming experience, like very technical oriented sport, and subtleties matter. And you can really only focus on changing one thing at a time. And when you begin to make that change, whether it's you're making your elbow a little bit higher or, the hip rotation or whatever it is, it feels unnatural. And your brain is convincing you that it's wrong, and it's only through like continually like repeating it and reaffirming it until it becomes rote that you start to like click into a new mode and see gains. But when I look at masters athletes, triathletes, or master swimmers, their technique's terrible, like because they didn't learn how to swim as a kid, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really hard to learn it later in life.
Yeah.
And they're time crunched. And when they go to the pool, they need to get in there 3,000 meters or whatever it is. And there's no time for the technique, but they're so inefficient, and they're in a hydrodynamic environment, right? Like everything is exponentially more significant, every poor technique problem. But the resistance to focusing on that ultimately becomes the Achilles heel. And it's like, forget about the conditioning. Like you need to take a year and focus on your technique. The water's not working for you. You're fighting it. And so you're exerting all this energy to go incredibly slow.
Yeah, agreed.
And so it's not any different in track and field. It's just that you're moving through air instead of water.
It's the same in any task that you're trying to improve, any motor task. We've got 3 buttons that we can press. We can press the structural button, which is your structure, which includes your body weight, your limb length, your height, your muscle fiber type, all of these different things, your joint structure. Some of those things we can impact, like your weight. We can't impact your height, but some of the things we can impact, and some of them we can't. There's your function. So those are all the different capacities. Your endurance capacity, your force capacity, your range of motion capacity, all of these different things. We can affect that. That's a button to press. And we can improve your swimming ability or your running ability by improving one of those capacities or a few of those capacities. And finally, there's the technical part, the coordinative button. And that's your degrees of freedom and how you free them and freeze them, and your self-organizing capacities, or your understanding of how to move. So it's, coaching, and even when you're coaching yourself, and, many of us, that's what we're doing, right? We're just exercising and moving and doing things and trying to improve and really coaching ourselves. We don't have coaches. But think about it. Those are the 3 buttons. Am I going to get better just by losing 20 pounds? Do I need to lose that? Is that a bigger thing for me than maybe getting stronger or becoming, more technical? Yeah, that's probably a good start for me. Or is it, I'm pretty happy with my structure, but I'm really weak, or I've got no endurance capacity, but I'm pretty coordinated. All right, so that's the button I'm going to press. Or the structure's pretty good. I'm lean. There's not a lot more I can do there. I can apply good forces through good ranges of motion. I have good endurance capacity, but my coordination really sucks. So that's the button I'm going to press. What you're saying is, with most of these athletes, they got this one. They've got the structure. They've got the function, but they lack in the technique. And I feel like that's where people really get it wrong, and what is the solution for that? I'm going to do some technical drills prior to doing this thing. That's not how we get better at anything. We actually have to think about getting better at the thing while we're doing the thing. And that's the hard bit. And understanding, as we said, the gap and how long of a commitment that you're signing up for. And you may even be signing up for a mistake, like Tiger Woods did.
Yeah.
He wasn't trying to get worse. He wasn't trying to hurt himself. He was trying to get better. So we've got to be really careful, first and foremost, before we say, I'm going to try and improve my technique by doing X, Y, and Z. We have to be really careful, first and foremost, before doing that.
What is the average volume of the average elite sprinter in terms of the amount that they're running every week?
I think that differs from system to system. When you talk about volume, you can be talking about anything from, say, 65 to 70% of their maximum sprint speed, all the way up to 100% of it. The amount of time that we spend doing 100% maximum sprint speed per week, probably less than 300 meters. Like, it's not much.
Yeah.
And some programs might be maximal about 1,000 meters. It's very, very little. Most elite sprint programs are pretty polarized, like most middle distance programs are at this point pretty polarized. There's a little bit of high intensity work and quite a lot of low intensity work. It's the same as sprinting. We do a lot of work at 65 to 70%, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 4,000 to 5,000 meters a week of that. We do a little bit of work, somewhere 200 to 500. That's probably about the range of maximal work. And the rest of the work, a little bit of work happens in the middle, but not much.
Yeah. But in terms of the amount of, let's just put it in mileage terms, like how many miles a week? Like a lot of, including like warm up, just running really slow around the track. I'm saying this because I think there is a misconception out there that these athletes aren't doing that much running, when in fact they actually are probably doing more running than the average, amateur 10K runner.
There's a lot of movement. There may not be a lot of just linear running, jogging, but there is, we'll go out on the track and we start training at 9:45. The athletes get there at 9:15. They do about half an hour of prep work on themselves, rolling and stretching and doing whatever, maybe getting some therapy. We start the warm-up at 9:45. And typically we finish about 1 o'clock. And there's a lot of moving between that 9:45 and that 1 o'clock. I'd need to check the GPS, but I would think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 to 8 miles of movement. That's every day.
Yeah.
And then we go to the weight room and we do a bunch of stuff in the weight room.
So 6 to 8 miles. So you're looking at 80 miles a week of running or of movement, I would say, right?
Yeah, 6 to 8 a day multiplied by 5 or 6. So 50?
50?
Yeah, 40 to 50. It's a lot.
Interesting.
Yeah. We don't do any jogging. We do zero jogging.
Zero jogging.
Zero jogging. we do striding and sprinting, and that's it. Yeah.
Speaking of jogging, what do you think again, back to the average kind of endurance athlete or running enthusiast, what can that individual learn from the world of sprinting? I think endurance athletes, we love our zone 2, and we like building our base, and quite frankly, for most people, a lot of speed work, is that gonna make them faster in a 50K when their, average pace is 8:30 or 9 minutes a mile or something like that? But I think there's more and more interesting science coming out around the importance of doing threshold and speed work in terms of improving your capacity as an endurance athlete. So I'm curious around your thoughts.
Yeah, speed reserve matters for sure. It matters at every event from 100 meters up to a marathon. I'm sure I don't know anything about any of the ultras, I'm sorry, but typically the fastest marathoners or the people that win the marathon races are also really, they're the fastest people as well. You put them in a 400 meter and they would win the 400 meters.
At the elite level,
At the elite level.
Like they're doing a lot of intense speed work.
100%. 100%. So the question then is, what is the transference down to the average, Joe or Jane? And for me, it's like, are you really that interested in maximizing your 10K, your marathon, or your 100 mile? Like, if that's really important to you, then try to figure out what you need to do. So capacity is first and foremost the most important thing. If this is really important for you, the performance of this, and not just the experience of it, or just being excellent, or doing things that you really enjoy, then find a way to do some speed work within that, because that increased speed, any speed that's below that speed will be at a lower percentage of your maximum sprint speed, so you can be a little bit more economical at these various speeds. That's basic, It's just then, like, what does that look like? For speed work for us, and this is a speed session, might be 2 by 60 meters.
Right.
That's it. That's the session.
This is the focus of the entire day.
Right.
We're doing all the other stuff, but it's really just about
we are warming up for an hour and a half, plus getting maybe an hour of treatment for 2 60-meter runs. That's it.
That's fucking hilarious.
That's probably different from most people who are listening, right? Speed work for them might be, all right, we're going to do some 1-minute repeats or 30-second repeats or whatever and take a long recovery. That's the big thing, is like when we were saying before about the difference between running and sprinting. If you're actually trying to get faster, think about the recovery that you have, or the density of your programming. Doing 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off for 3 miles isn't speed work. That's maximum aerobic speed. It's not improving your speed. To improve your speed, you need to look at rest to work ratios of upwards of 10. So if you're running for 30 seconds, 5 minutes recovery. And that's hard for many joggers and endurance athletes, It's hard.
There's a lot of discussion around the number of hours we need to sleep to be well. But actually, it's the quality of our sleep that matters most, how restful, which of course is a function of your sleep environment, the foundation of which, of course, is your mattress. If you've had the privilege of slumbering on a birch, you already know well that a mattress is not just a mattress. It is truly a worthy investment in your well-being that will return your life 100-fold. Why? Because all birch mattresses are crafted with organic fair trade cotton, natural latex, and other responsibly sourced materials. The natural materials make it hypoallergenic and help regulate temperature. And while their non-toxic construction means no harmful off-gassing, it's that kind of thoughtful design that makes a real difference in your sleep quality. You know what? I would like all my viewers, to enjoy what I'm enjoying, which is a deep, restful night's sleep with a new mattress from Birch. Right now, you can get 27% off site-wide, plus 2 free EcoRest pillows with mattress purchase. Just go to birchliving.com/richroll. We are going to talk about gut health for a second. As the emergent science is making abundantly clear, the quality of your gut health is crucial to almost every other aspect of health. So we got to do everything we can to ensure that our microbiome is thriving. All of which is why I turned to Seed and their DSO1 Daily Symbiotic as an essential aspect of my daily routine. Seed really is different. Their science team is top-notch, the testing is rigorous and evidence-based, and their formula is a 2-in-1 symbiotic that combines both probiotics and prebiotics that actually survive the journey through your gut thanks to their clever capsule and capsule design. Since starting with Seed, I have noticed some pretty real changes in my digestion. Plus, there's the added bonus of being able to just throw them in my bag when I'm traveling. There's no refrigeration needed. And it's good to know that Seed is all meticulously tested for over 500 contaminants. It's simple, effective gut support. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to go to seed.com/richroll, and then you're going to use the code richroll25 for 25% off your first month of DSO1. But from a biometric perspective, you're not going to be able to run fast unless your body knows how to run fast.
Correct. Yeah.
Also.
Yeah.
Right?
100%.
So aside from the conditioning part, there's just a kind of neurological piece there of connecting, like just your body knowing that it can do that and what it feels like when it's doing that.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with this guy, David Roche? I had him on the podcast.
No.
He's a longtime endurance athlete, kind of marathon runner, was a track and field athlete, and has been a coach in Boulder for a long time and had never done anything in the ultra world. And then he decides he's going to do his first 100-miler, never done a 100-miler before. And he trained for it in a very unconventional way by doing almost not exclusively, but way more than anybody else had before, like focusing on threshold work and running fast and acclimating his body to being able to withstand running at speeds much faster than people are used to running for distances like that. And granted, he had this huge base that he'd been building for, 20 years or something like that. So obviously he's tapping into that. But his approach was really unique and it paid off. He won Leadville and just crushed it with an insane time. Did he break the record? I think he broke the Leadville. Did he break the Leadville record? I think he did.
Really?
Yeah, in his very first 100 miler.
Wow.
I think he got injured recently, but then he was going to go to Western States and try to do it again. But basically, I'm bringing all this up because he's introducing the concept of speed in a world in which, for the first time or in a different and new way in that world. And I think there is something to be said for playing around with different approaches. And so with you being the speed master, obviously your world is like speed in the most, finite way.
Yeah.
And it's unclear how much that would translate into that other very different world. But I think from a technique perspective and from a biomechanical perspective, I think there's a lot to be learned.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. For me, the fastest athletes, even the best athletes in any other sport, are the ones who coordinate all the component parts of their system the best. So they may, have really strong calves or really strong quads or really strong glutes or, great pecs or whatever it is. And, all the best ones have that. But the really, truly best are the ones who could coordinate every single component part of their system. So from what's happening down the foot to the ankle, to the knee, to the hip, to their arms and their shoulders and how they're carrying their head and all of these things, how it coordinates, how the entire system coordinates. Now, each component part of that system is really important. It's important that you've got a really stiff spring at your ankle so you can attenuate some of these high forces. But how that ankle relates to the knee and how the knee relates to the hip and how those three joints relate together and how that relates to the entire system as a whole, that's more important. And that's coordination. So, and coordination, really, what we're talking about when we're talking about a 100-miler, that's economy. So if you can be more coordinated, you can be more economical. So perhaps by doing more speed work for this guy, he became a little bit more coordinated. He learned how to, intuitively, he wasn't probably cognitively aware of this, but his system became more connected. So how his ankle related to his knee, to his hip, to the rest of his system, everything just started working in a much more coordinated fashion. We don't do that when we're just doing zone 2 work. It's not a coordination exercise.
Being able to maintain that for a longer period of time because he trained it.
Right.
Yeah.
100%. Now that's kind of what we were saying before, right? We've got to identify what it is about us as individuals that make us us. Like, what are we good at? And then lean into that. So just because he trained that way doesn't necessarily mean that everyone else who trained exactly like that. Yeah,
back to the internet, drawing a reductive conclusion
we're going to do
from
that now.
Like, this is the way, it's the Norwegian 4x4 or
exactly.
whatever, it's just a different version of that idea.
Yeah.
How much does technology come into play in terms of how you work with athletes? Like, what technology do you use? Like, I would imagine, videoing your athletes and finding ways to really get granular about their technique, or how is the body, coordinating from an internal perspective? Is there a way to measure that and to measure progress?
Yeah, a lot. Track and field is the ultimate technology sport. So a stopwatch. Yeah. And everybody's used a stopwatch for going mountain, 100 years or so. And even beginner coaches have a stopwatch. And now beginner coaches also have a camera. Beginner coaches also generally have a camera and some sort of biomechanical app that they've paid $5 for or whatever, right? So that's where we start. At the higher levels, it's significantly more than that. So if you look at what sprinting is, or even what running is, ground contact time, flight time, step length, and step frequency, and velocity. And velocity is the result of these four things: contact time, flight time, step frequency, step length. If I watched you run out there, I can probably have a pretty good guess of what those four things are, but it wouldn't be a great one. I wouldn't be able to accurately understand the difference between your contact time of 1200ths or 1400ths, for example. So you need really robust technology to be able to do that. Luckily, there's techs out there now that we don't have to rely on doing that in a lab with a biomechanist. There's different AI apps. In fact, we've got one. It's called Motion IQ, where we just film it with a camera, and it'll tell us what the contact time is, what the flight time is, what the step length is, and what the step frequency is. Now, all of these are component parts of the system. They're called spatial temporal variables. They determine how fast you are. All of them are important. But if I told you that my step length was 250 centimeters, that doesn't tell you anything about how fast I am until I tell you what the step frequency is, or the contact time, or the flight time is. So it's always this connection, the interrelationship between these component parts. So this is, coaching at this level is you have to know this data. You have to know that the elite males have to have a step frequency of between 4.4 steps a second and 5 steps a second. And they need to have a step length of somewhere between 240 and 280. And there's a big range because of the range of the athletes that we're talking about. Usain Bolt had a step frequency and the world record of, I think, 4.38. So 4.38 steps a second, but his step length was 278 centimeters.
Right.
So if you have a small step frequency, you better have a huge length. And if I don't know that data as a coach, then I'm just sort of blindly thinking about, well, what am I doing here? What am I trying to improve then if I don't know the step length and step frequency, or the contact time and the flight time? If you've got a contact time of 0.080, for example, which is less than a hundredth of a second, and you're in the air for, let's say, 0.15, then that's way too long in the air. And you can kind of see that if somebody's, he just looks like he's bounding. But if we've got a way in which we can actually look at that and determine, objectively what that is, that for me is really, really valuable information.
Wow, that's way more intense than I thought.
Is that right?
Yeah. No, that's fascinating. And then within that, can you also gauge force? The force at which the foot is.
You can estimate force.
You can.
So you can estimate force.
Are there like sort of power meters that you can put in the shoes?
You can do that too. There's many other different ways. But in fact, J.B. Moran and Dr. Ken Clark and Peter Weyand, many other sort of sprint biomechanists have looked at this. And there is a pretty accurate way to measure vertical force based upon how fast you're running and your body weight. So and you can estimate that with pretty good precision, actually.
And then, of course, over like 100 meters or 200 meters, there's stages within this race, right? And if you were to measure those factors across those distances, it also becomes a factor of looking at when they begin to decline, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, and if you don't have that data, again, like all we're seeing is with our eyes, and the eyes are great. We have a master's program that we've started this year, and a big part of it is the first couple of months is trying to get across to the students the importance of actually coaching. Over the course of the last 40, like when I started coaching 40 years ago, there was no tech. We had no tech. We had a stopwatch, really. We had a position.
You could video people.
Yeah, but that was even that. Like you had to have money to buy a $500 video camera.
Right.
Like it was hard, right? You had a position transducer that you could attach to a bar that might cost $300, and so we could get velocity from this position transducer, but not much else. It was really, really hard. And now, because there's so much tech, coaches are just being inundated with all of it, and they've forgotten. We still have to coach. You still have to develop an eye. You still have to have some basic, some subjective level of understanding of what you're seeing in front of you. And the capacity for many coaches right now is they kind of lose that. It's still really, really important. So when it comes to the fatigue, we can see it. If you've got a good coaching eye, you can see, okay, this athlete's slowing down. And they're slowing down because they're spending longer on the ground. But you still don't know when that is happening, how much longer they are on the ground, what is the second order effects of that, and how we can improve it. We've got to be able to come up with ways in which we can measure that. So that's where we can use tech really well. But
Right.
My rule on tech is I identify the tech that is the most important for us and rely on it as little as we possibly can.
But you can foresee a situation, and maybe you already can do this with your AI tool, of feeding the AI all the data from a certain athlete's, training and race performances with all of those metrics that you were talking about. And the AI being able to crunch that and saying, listen, here's what's happening at 80 meters. And if this athlete just, shortened their stride length by, 2 millimeters and can, basically lift off more quickly or stay on the ground longer, we can avoid this because this person does this every time, and here's a possible solution for you to look at. Is that
maybe?
Is that
maybe?
Yeah.
I'm
like I don't know anything, so
there are tools out there now that it's going that way.
Right.
I'm skeptical.
Yeah.
I'm really skeptical. This is a complex system. It's a nonlinear complex system where we don't really understand the relationship between component parts until after the fact. Now, if AI can come in and help us understand those relationships a little bit quicker, great. But it's not going to make decisions for us. There's no way. No, not in our lifetime anyway.
Yeah. It's probably not going to be able to tell you whether, Noah Lyles will be better if he doesn't wear the pearl necklace, or brought out a different Pokemon card.
Correct. Correct.
So I don't think your role is going anywhere.
At least for the next 20 years or so.
Yeah. Humans are incomprehensible.
Yes.
In a way that will provide you with career longevity, I think.
Good. I'm glad.
What do you recommend for somebody who's listening to this who has never really thought about sprinting and is thinking, maybe I should, learn more about this? Like, what's a way in? On Huberman, you went way deep on drills and plyometrics and skipping and tools. And I don't want to necessarily retread all of that area. I think, you guys had an amazing conversation. And if people want to hear in detail more about that stuff, they should definitely go and watch or listen to that. But just to initiate, the average human being or that avid endurance athlete, how do you usher them into your world a little bit?
Skip. I think skipping is really important. So I will repeat that. I think skipping is a really nice gateway into sprinting because it's a very similar gait pattern that requires the coordination of the ankle, the knee, and the hip. That's really important because that is the biggest difference between sprinting and jogging. Jogging, there's not a lot of coordination going on. There's a lot of just, over-amortization, essentially. You're spending a lot of time on the ground and you're just rolling through the joints. It's not super coordinated. Where skipping, you have to be coordinated. So I think skipping is a really good way to do it. And skipping to warm up or put skipping into the runs or, every 5 minutes do a 30-second skip. I do feel like that is a really good gateway into sprinting.
Like, what is it doing that is so important?
The best things are the ones that teach you without you having to think about how to do it. Skipping is a pretty innate, intuitive gait pattern, so it's something that we learn to do when we're like 3 or 4 years old, right? If we just went out and skipped down the street outside here, we'd be able to do that. And you could see that the ankle joint, the knee joint, and the hip joint all coordinate, meaning they all fire and relax in a coordinated fashion to keep us moving effectively and efficiently. And it's much stiffer than if you were running. You can go out there and run a zillion different ways and you can think about it. But when you're skipping, there's a lot less cognitive involvement in that. So I think just the stiffness, the systemic stiffness, the vertical stiffness, which is the coordination between the ankle, the knee, and the hip, is something that we don't improve when we're jogging. We only improve when we're at a higher velocity or when we're skipping. So I feel like that is one way to do it. Another way to do it is when you do your speed work or when you're doing your interval work or your fartlek or whatever, think about sprinting as if somebody's up in the sky. They've got a rope attached to the top of your head and they're pulling you as tall as you possibly can. So you're always up here. And that just alone better coordinates the lower body joints. Because typically running, especially if we're running longer distances, we tend to just shrink a little bit and we go small and we just drop down. Now, if we're going to put in a sprint, we're going to put a 30-second sprint in, just think about being taller, not pushing the chest out, but just being taller from the top of the head. And then so that's from the top, that's elongating everything and just forcing a more coordinated spring. And second, being stiffer on impact through the foot. So thinking being flat foot on the contact and getting off pretty quickly. So just flat foot, flat foot, flat foot, flat foot. As if you're almost jumping on a trampoline. If you pushed off or toed off on a trampoline, you'd get over-rotated and you'd fall forward. But if you thought about just being flat and just bouncing with a really, really stiff foot and ankle, that's required on sprinting, but isn't required on running, by the way, and that's fine. But just think about doing that. So just, for me, there's not drills other than just doing, as we said, some plyometrics, some skipping, so on and so forth. It's just when you're running, just thinking about it. It's just thinking about being a little bit taller, thinking about the position of your pelvis. Am I really anteriorly rotated here? Am I just or do I need to tuck my pelvis under? Do I need to be a little stiffer on impact? All of these types of things. Just think about how you're running when you run. What
if you're an avid runner and perhaps you do tempo work and threshold work and stuff like that, but you can't remember the last time you just said, I'm going to run 100 meters as fast as I can.
Yeah, don't do it.
even if you're a very fit person, this is not something I would recommend you do.
Yeah.
Like you're risking injury, right?
Yeah.
So what do you suggest in terms of building somebody up, into a place where then they can begin to do that kind of thing?
There's a very unique demand on the tissue when you sprint maximally. And if the fastest you've gone as a percentage of your maximum sprint speed is 80, and all of a sudden you go to 100, it's only going to end one way.
Yeah.
So it's the same rules as everything else.
Yeah.
Progressive overload.
But we all still think we're 14.
We're not.
You know what I mean?
We're not. You're not.
What do you
not.
mean? I can go I remember when I used to do that. Why can't I do that now?
Yeah, no, you can't.
Yeah.
You can't. Like that, and you cannot do it. So don't try. But if you've gone to, 70%, go to 75% and do that for 3 or 4 sessions. And once you do that, go to 80%, 85%. Time yourself. This is the only way to get better at anything. If you're trying to get your bench press from 200 pounds to 400 pounds, you don't put 400 pounds on the bar. You put 205 pounds on the bar. Next time, maybe 210. And maybe in 3 years, you can do 400 pounds.
Right.
It's the same.
I want to know a little bit more about the world of bobsled and skeleton. So you've coached athletes in this world. It's so interesting. How is getting an athlete prepared in those worlds similar or different than working with a track and field athlete?
I love working with bobsledders and skeleton athletes. I started in this business of speed in about 1995, 96. And I started working with bobsled athletes in 1998. So immediately, I was based up in Canada, in Calgary, where there's winter for 7 months of the year. There's not a lot of
more bobsledders than track and field athletes.
There's not a lot of elite sprinters in Calgary, but there's a lot of bobsledders. We had the 1980 Olympic Games there, right? So you've got a bobsled track. So there's lots of people wanting to do bobsled. But the biggest difference is sprinters or elite sprinters have always been elite. They've always been the fastest kid. So they've always felt like they're the best athlete. Bobsledders are failed athletes in another sport. They're failures. So they've either failed in football, or they failed in track, or they failed in rugby, or they failed in baseball, or failed in decathlon, or whatever it is. And they pick up bobsled because they couldn't do something else. So you have a certain type of mentality and psychology when you're working with bobsledders, a certain type of humility, a certain type of respect for the process that it required to be a sustainably long-term elite athlete.
And maybe something to prove.
And something to prove, 100%, which you don't always get in sprinting because they've always been the fast kid. So you take it for granted a little bit until it's too late. Oh, I can't take this for granted anymore. I got to do something else. Bobsledders not like that, and skeleton athletes are not like that. So I really enjoyed working with those athletes because they're all in on whatever they needed to do, right? You talk about marginal gains. They're all in on whatever. What is the marginal gain that I can do this better? How can I get better? We're sprinters. Yeah, I'm already fast, man. Like, what are you going to tell me? I coached a kid, Andre de Grasse. He's a seven-time Olympic medalist. He got 3 Olympic medals in the 2016 games when I coached him. And we're having a conversation at the start of the year about nutrition because his nutrition wasn't great. So I'm talking to him about it, and he's listening to me, and he's a really nice kid. And he said, Coach, last year I won NCAAs in the 100 meters and the 200 meters. In the 100 meters, in the final, I ran 9:75, and then I had a foot-long subway. And then 45 minutes later, I ran the 200 in I think he ran 1957 windy and won the 200 meters. So, and he stopped.
Yeah.
So, I get it. You know what I mean? Like, it's, what can I tell you? We had a conversation about it. We didn't just stop there, but it's fair. You know what I mean? Like a kid at that level with that type of ability, that type of capacity, can go and eat a foot-long subway 45 minutes before running like 19.5 in the 200 meters.
I grew up with this kid, Mike Barrowman, who went on to break world records in breaststroke and win gold medals at the Olympics. And his pre-race meal was going to McDonald's, and he would talk about it in interviews.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And the other thing with bobsled that I really enjoyed was, I see this in sprinting as well. It took me a little bit of a longer time. But in bobsled, you don't have to be really strong to be a great bobsledder. But if you're not really strong, you better be pretty fast. You don't have to be really fast, but if you're not really fast, you better be really strong. And apart from that, you may not just be average strength and average speed, but you may be super elastic and you can be elite. So there's many different ways to be super elite in bobsled. And I enjoyed the puzzle of trying to figure out like what makes you unique, what makes you elite at this, and how do we get that better while maybe working on some of your weaknesses as well. Where in sprinting, it's, intuitively you think, all right, they're elite because they're incredibly fast. And it took me a long time to figure out what that was. All right, there's much more to that than just being fast. It's still, as we said before, step length and step frequency, contact time and flight time, and looking a little bit deeper into the system. But bobsled was a really simple way for me to organize my thoughts around how to improve different people, whether that be football or basketball or bobsled or sprinters. Yeah.
In bobsled, you have to be down low and you're pushing something. So there's an added dynamic to all of that.
Yeah.
I would suspect that the track and field athletes that are really good out of the blocks, that would be something that would translate into bobsled because you're down in that lower position where you're really driving force forward lower.
Yeah. I've coached a couple of really excellent bobsledders who transitioned out of track and field, and they were incredible starters. Lolo Jones and Lauren Williams.
Yeah, I was going to ask about Lola. She's probably the most famous sort of transfer over.
Yeah, incredible athlete. Like absolutely incredible. She's 41 years old and she just represented USA.
She's still doing it,
She's
right?
still doing it.
Yeah,
she was a world championship this past year, pushing the USA One sled at 41. Like she really incredible athlete. And the other one who's also incredible was Lauren Williams. Lauren Williams was an Olympic silver medalist in the 100 meters, ran 10:84. And she's also got an Olympic medal in bobsled. Lolo didn't.
Yeah, there hasn't been any medals there, right?
Yeah, but Lauren has two, both in winter and summer. And the transition's really easy. Like if your bobsled is not that hard for a sprinter to pick up. You're just now running with your hands on something.
Then why aren't more people doing it? Like if you're getting fourth at the games or you're going to Diamond League and you're finaling, but you're not winning, like it seems like let's just go over here.
You don't get paid.
Yeah, there's that.
Right. That's yeah. There is the potential that you can go to the Olympics and medal. And that's
back to your goal too,
back
right?
to your goal.
Is your goal to go to the Olympics?
Is you've always dreamed of going to the Olympics for 100 meters, or your goal is always to run track, or your goal is that. No one dreams of being a bobsledder when they're 12 years old. Nobody.
I bet there are kids in Calgary that do.
Maybe. Yeah, there's probably a few. So it's hard, right? We're going through this process right now. I'm coaching Kaylee Humphreys, American bobsledder, and we're trying to recruit. So if anyone's listening here and you think you can be an incredible bobsled push athlete, we're trying to recruit a push athlete for her this is an Olympic season in Winter Olympics. And we're looking at the track and field lists, who are the fast, 60-meter athletes or 100-meter athletes that may not be going, the world championships in track and field, but maybe could make it to the Olympics and maybe get a medal in Winter Olympics.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating coaching athletes in both of those sports. And in fact, I think, a lot of the athletes will say who've done both, who've gone back and forth like a Lolo, that bobsled actually makes them better. Because bobsled, you're pushing this 200 kilo thing. You've got to be pretty strong. So it forces you to work on that capacity for a year or two that you're not doing track. And maybe you even needed that mental break from track, and then you can go back and do it again. I've seen a lot of athletes actually improve.
So they've gone out, done the bobsled, come back to track and field, and then done PBs?
And been better, yeah. Seen that multiple times, yeah. The Canadian relay coach, the Canadian 4x1, 4x4 relay coach, his name is Glenroy Gilbert, he did that. So he was part of the relay program in 95, 96, 97 for Canada. So he's got an Olympic gold medal in 1996. He went and did bobsled, came back and ran his PR in the 100 meters.
Wow.
There's quite a few of them that have the same story.
Yeah, I would imagine there would be even more, but for the fact that, and maybe I'm wrong about this, that most of the athletes that make that transition are doing it in the sunset of their career. It's a way to, extend the longevity of their professional athletic career. So the chances that they're going to do that and then come back and do a personal best on the track are probably pretty low.
Yeah, there's less, for sure. Most of the athletes that do this is at the end of their whatever it was in the football career. They failed at something, as I said, right? Some of them are not that. Some of them can, like a Glenroy, and others can do both, for sure, and come back to it. But yeah, it's a lot of fun working with those athletes.
World records get broken with less regularity these days, especially in the sprint world. But what's your perspective on, ultimate human capacity at 100 meters?
Ultimate.
Like how much faster? What do you think, is possible?
Given the track that we have right now, and making some assumptions that maybe that track will improve, but not making the assumptions that they will improve it to the point where it actually can be significantly more additive. So let's say it's about the same. Maybe it's a little bit better, but it's about the same. Because you can make a track that just adds to every single step, and then who knows, right? This is one of the issues I have with the sport right now, with some of the technological super shoes and things, yeah. But not even super shoes, but also the tracks. The tracks are going that way. It's hard. One of the fun things about track is we can compare across decades and eras. And that's fun. That's great. We can't really do that anymore. When in 10 years, and it'll probably be 10 years, maybe 15 years, a male athlete comes and beats Usain Bolt's world record, you can't compare him to Usain Bolt, because Usain Bolt didn't have super shoes and had the track that was available to him in 2013 when he broke that world record. So given those constraints, that the shoes don't get significantly better, the track doesn't get significantly better, and a Usain Bolt comes in again, but maybe just a little bit better than a Usain Bolt, and let's say rather than getting hurt like Usain Bolt did when he was 23 years old and didn't really get any faster after that, maybe he's healthy and continues to run faster for another 5, 6, 7 years, maybe we see 9.3.
His record is 9.58?
9.58, correct. Correct. If you had to replay Bolt in today's scenario with the super spikes, and we did a better job, well, not we, but somebody, whoever's involved in the system, were able to maintain his health, and he stayed motivated for another 5 or 6, 7 years, he would have run close to 9.30, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
Beyond bobsled and skeleton, like you've mentioned, you work with all kinds of other athletes also, though, in many different sports.
Yeah. Yeah, we coach in person only elite track and field athletes. And that's fun. I started off as a coach, and I really love coaching. But I've done that for 40 years. We also, at this point in my career, I think it's just as fun for me to educate other coaches. So we've got this, a big platform online, a digital platform. We've got a master's degree, and we also consult with a lot of different professional teams and the athletes that they work with. So I just got back from Cleveland. I do some work with the Cleveland Browns, do some work with the Cleveland Guardians. We do a lot of stuff in baseball and help those coaches and educate those coaches and work with some of their athletes on some of the things that they're dealing with. Speed is more and more important in all of these sports now, whether it's soccer or football or baseball or hockey or what have you. And so more and more coaches are reaching out to people like me who are experts, quote unquote, in speed for helping them with some of the challenges that they have.
And what have you learned yourself from interfacing with like NFL football coaches? Like I'm sure there's there's things they're doing that are informing your approach as you're counseling them on speed.
I'm not learning a lot about how to coach speed.
No, they're not going to teach you how to coach speed, but just being exposed to like high-level coaches in a completely different sport.
I've consulted now with over 100 professional teams over the course of the last 15 years. And the biggest takeaway that I got is the most successful organizations are the ones where all the staff are on the same page and they all have an integrated system where they work on that. You would think that it would be really integrated. But traditionally, and still to this day, many teams have a very siloed system. Here's the therapists, here's the doctors, here's the strength staff, here's the technical staff, here's the GMs, here's the whatever. And it's very siloed.
Or
and
even
we never really have a conversation.
The defensive coordinator and the line coach.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The best football teams, the best soccer teams, the best basketball teams are those that are led well from the top. And the person at the top of that system understand the importance of having a truly integrated one, where everybody's having a conversation daily and working together daily. That's the biggest lesson that I've taken to our work. I talk a lot about it, and it's people may be getting sick of me talking about the importance of a system and a well-functioning integrated system, but it is everything in sport, at every level, at every scale. So does the athlete feel supported by the entirety of the system? And what does that mean? Is everybody working with the same objective, having the same words and the same conversations and singing from the same hymn sheet? It's everything. Every time I go into a team that does not have a functioning system, it's obvious immediately. You see it immediately. I'll go in and they bring me in to talk to them about speed or health or performance or whatever. And there might be 6 people there from the strength staff.
Right.
And the physios haven't shown up, or the ATs haven't shown up, and the assistant GM hasn't showed up, and the nutritionist hasn't shown up. I said, okay, there's a reason why you guys are 4 and 12, for example.
Yeah. Is there a team that you're comfortable sharing about that does this really well, or not necessarily a team that you've worked with, but like look at Premier League or look at, different sports and you go, these people have it dialed because they're all like operating as in unison at the highest level?
Smaller clubs, smaller teams, and smaller sports are forced to do this well because they don't have very many people. So most of the smaller teams and smaller leagues do this well. The bigger the team, the more component parts within it, it's more and more difficult to integrate. That said, at that level, when it's a bigger team, there's 2 teams that I feel have done this better than anyone. I did some work with the LA Rams a few years back, and they're really, really impressive. Like that is a well-functioning team. And then for a few years, I've helped out the guys at Arsenal FC in the Premier League.
Oh, that's cool.
And that's a great team, like really, really well-functioning. And so, as I said, it requires the right leader to understand the importance of this. And in both cases, you've got the right head coach who understands, this is what is important. This is how I'm going to build a sustainable, long-term, successful team, is by having everyone, be integrated together. Both of them have at least 45-minute morning meetings with, I think Arsenal have 18 people on that table every morning with the head coach.
Every morning.
Every morning.
Wow.
So it's really impressive. Those guys, the Arsenal for sure, do a great job. It's not surprising at all how well they do.
Yeah.
And then I did a little bit of work with Man City for a while. And Man City's a machine. Like that is a massive machine with a lot of different moving parts. And it's really, really challenging when you've got that size of machine to be integrated. So I get it from their perspective. It's hard, you just have to work harder to get there. I feel like they could be more successful even if they were a little bit better integrated.
Yeah. Soccer's your passion, though.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
If Arsenal said, come on board full time.
No, I wouldn't do it.
Really?
No, I wouldn't do it. I'm a Man City fan, first and foremost.
Man City's, they're your guys.
Yeah, if they called me up and said, I still wouldn't do it. No, I love what I'm doing.
Even though
much.
You can see a clear path to solving the problem and getting them to.
But the great thing about working in multiple sports, and the great thing, well, first of all, I get multiple different challenges across these sports and multiple different conversations and multiple different people in doing different things, and that's really energizing for me. I love that. But I coach track and field, and I love coaching track and field. If I was coaching soccer, and you're a soccer player, and we see this problem with how you run or how you perform or what's going on with whatever, and we can improve that, we don't see the direct correlation to your performance as a soccer player or the performance of the team. It may have impacted it in a positive way. We see that immediately in track. Immediately. If I make a technical change or a programming change or a change with your therapeutic input, we see that immediately. And that's what I love about track and field.
Yeah. The lessons that you learn in sport are lessons for life, though. And as much as you bump up against the idea that you're shaping young minds, you are. And I would imagine in turn, you're learning from these athletes and these experiences that you're having and these other teams and athletes outside of track and field that you're working with. Like, what are the lessons that you've taken away through these many decades of doing this that are lessons that you apply in your life off the track?
There's not much of an off-life track.
Yeah, I know. These things are integrated. I get that. But you know what I'm getting at? Like, I'm trying to leave the audience with kind of the valid lessons for life that are applicable in sport, but are really, guiding forces in your value system, your worldview, and how you approach decision making, in general.
So I'm going to zoom in slightly, and then maybe we'll zoom out. I'm a big believer of, first and foremost, when I'm coaching an athlete, of trying my best to understand what it is that makes them them. Like, what are their unique abilities? That's so important to me. And I was driving over here today, so I have a funny story. I was just thinking about this analogy. So I flew into Burbank last night, and I picked up a car. I rented a car. And I haven't driven a new car. I haven't bought a new car since 1988. And I think that's the last time I bought a new car, 1988. I don't have a new car at home. So I'm driving this car, and I'm on the freeway. And I'm just changing lanes, and there's no cars around, so I change lanes, and it pulls me back into this lane. So there's this governing system within the car that's trying to keep me here. And then you can push through it. Right?
Yeah.
But the whole time I'm driving here, I'm feeling this, and it's pissing me off.
It's giving you a nudge.
It's annoying.
Yeah.
Why are you doing this to me?
Big brother.
Like, to the point where I'm getting phenomenologically, like, uncomfortable through this. Like, it's like I want to stop and figure out how to turn this thing off. And I'm thinking while I'm doing this, this is like coaching. So many coaches do the same thing with athletes. They set these really narrow guidelines and they keep them here. Our job is to try to understand what it is in that athlete that made them do this thing. How can they express themselves fully in this thing? And then try to find that and allow that to flourish. And we call that, trying to understand what their unique abilities are and then just feeding those unique abilities. And I feel like that is a lesson for me, like a really important lesson for me. What is it that's unique about me? What is it unique feeds me? What feeds my everything? What's important for me from a movement perspective? So don't allow the system to tell me what exercise is or what type of exercise I should be doing. What's going to feed me today? What serves me? So I feel like that's one of the biggest lessons that coaching has given me. The way in which I look at coaching towards an athlete's unique abilities. Let me come back out, and rather than just falling into commodified exercise routines that the system tells me is the most healthy thing to do, is, all right, what do I feel like doing? Like, how am I going to explore this universe, this space around me? That's probably the biggest thing. Being
connected with yourself. And not only that, like listening to that voice.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. I think that is, for me, it's so important. It really is.
But you need somebody outside of you to be able to see that in you and help you kind of bring expression to that, right? Like, who's coaching Stu?
Right, yeah. Well, Stu is, right?
Right?
I think
that's part of the problem.
Right,
we all need a coach.
We need somebody. Yeah. We need some direction. Problem is, we're being directed by an incentivized system, like commodified, incentivized system to do these things that, is confusing exercise with movement and health and fitness.
Yeah.
That's the problem. But I totally understand it. Like, I'm experienced and expert enough where I'm able to coach myself, and many others are not.
Yeah. So you think.
Yeah. So I hope.
Yeah. Because we all have our blind spots.
Right. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure, right? What I would hope, and this is one of the factors that I kind of live my movement life by, is I try to do as many different things in as many different ways and in as many different environments as possible. And I think it's that variability that is really important to lean into as we age. We had that when we were kids. We just did everything all the time.
And the beginner's mind.
Yeah. And it just becomes narrower and narrower and narrower and narrower. And now all we do is we jog, and maybe we lift weights and do some yoga. And I feel like it's important. Really, health is about variability. Can you do a bunch of different things in a bunch of different ways? Being adaptable.
Well, this relates to curiosity. And curiosity is something you talk a lot about in terms of making sure that you're approaching the athletes with curiosity, that they're being curious about their own careers, like that, like the beginner's mind, the staying active, doing different things, the variability is really about indulging your curiosity.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. We get this question a lot in some of the education events that we do. Like, what is the most important trait that you have, or that you think other coaches need to develop? And that's always the answer for me.
Curiosity.
Curious. We bring in 12 interns every year, and I look for the curious ones. They don't need to be expert. They don't need to be experienced. But are you going to ask questions? Be curious. You can always tell who's going to be an excellent coach. The head of strength and conditioning at Arsenal, his name is Sam Wilson. He came and spent 12 weeks with us about 7 years ago. He was at the time an academy strength and conditioning coach at Arsenal. And man, that guy didn't leave my hip for 12 weeks. Like, he was annoying. Like, just asking questions over and over and over. And I loved it. I loved every second of that. And I knew immediately this cat's going to be a great coach. And now he's head of strength and conditioning at, one of the biggest football teams in the world, and just killing it.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
As we wind this down, I want to turn attention back to some of the things that we can take away and use in our life. We talked about skipping. Is there other sprint-oriented running situational sort of things that we could start to practice and play around with curiosity?
I think there's two ways to look at this. There's one, when you look at, we want to be high-quality movers. We want to move in a high-quality way, generally. You don't want to move crappily. I think everybody's going to, admit to that. So what is high-quality movement? So think about it from a quantitative perspective and a qualitative perspective. The quantity we kind of do okay on, mileage, weight on a bar, all of these different things. But quality we don't. So just think about the quality of your movement and try to be generally a little bit more aware of what that is and how I can do this thing, whatever that thing is, hiking, jogging, running, sprinting, lifting weights, yoga. Just think about how can I do this with more quality. And sometimes that's enough. You don't need somebody to saying, hey, Rich, the quality of this isn't good enough. I want you to do it better. You can feel that yourself. I'm going to try to do this with a little bit more quality, slow it down, be a little bit more aware of what my body is doing in space and time. So just take the time to pay attention to how you're moving in anything. I feel like that is really important. And number two is the quantitative aspect. Some of the things that we don't do is we do volume pretty well, and we do intensity pretty well, but we don't think about the actual pattern of movement that we're trying to improve. So think about the weights that we do. We think about these, 6 or 7 fundamental movement patterns or whatever they are. The one that we kind of ignore is that hip extension pattern, which is so important. The best walkers, the best runners, the best joggers, the best marathoners, the best sprinters, they always have the best hip extension pattern. So find ways in which you can work on that pattern specifically. So that means doing a lot more unilateral work in the weight room. If you like doing weights, go in there, spend time on one leg or a stagger stance or kickstand stance rather than doing double leg work. Do lunges, do reverse lunges, do different things like that. We're working in an extended hip pattern is such an important piece. And if you do that through different velocities, different ranges of motions, at different forces, you'll become a much better mover.
Yeah, this is Kelly Starrett territory.
It is.
The mobility.
Kelly and I talked
piece.
about this a ton.
Yeah.
I think he started while he's having a conversation with me on the phone one night. He says, man, we got to start because this was when Knees Over Toes guy was just coming out. And he was just starting to get popular. And Kelly says, man, I like this cat. He's pretty good. But we need to start a knee behind butt thing, So he's got the Instagram handle, Knees Behind Butt. That's Kelly.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's nothing on there right now. But we've always talked about let's feed into that thing and make this thing a thing. It is a thing. Knees over toes is important. I think it's a little bit overplayed. But knee behind the butt is really important.
Knee behind the butt.
Knee behind the butt.
So how do you get knees behind the butt? So give me an example of that.
So doing a reverse lunge and putting this
I see.
Just walking.
Okay. Yeah.
Just walking, Most people when they run, the knee might just go just behind the butt. And if you don't have maybe the capacity or the flexibility or the mobility in the hip, then just to get it a little bit further, you might get an anterior rotation of the pelvis. And then you don't have a high quality knees behind butt pattern.
I see.
If you have better structure, better mobility, better flexibility, you can get your knee behind the butt better.
Well, I think you need to get on that Instagram account. Yeah. But on the first piece, I think that's the bigger piece. When you think of sprinting, you think of athletes who are so finely attuned to their bodies and every detail in every microsecond of what's happening, right? The level that they're paying attention to holistically, everything that's happening is like at such an insane level.
So,
and to the extent that we can take some small portion of that and apply it into our daily lives and our, physical routines,
yes.
like, it's actually a small ask. I know I go out and I run and, half the time I'm tuned out. I'm thinking about other things, or, I'll call it active meditation or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were to ask me, like, how's your foot landing, or what are your shoulders doing? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not paying attention to it.
The best, we're always aware. It's just a matter of whether we're actually cognitively aware at that moment in time.
Where you're
of what's
focusing
going on.
Your attention.
Exactly. And the elites, it's not like, I'm asking athletes to be aware of every single part of their system as they're doing this thing. It's just one piece. And as we said before, sometimes it's just an emotion or a mood. But there has to be a point where you know what you're doing. And I guess here would be the third thing that we can take away, is the fact that the system, the body, is a rotational system. The hips oscillate and undulate, meaning they go back and forth. So there's internal rotation and external rotation. And they also go up and down. So they go up and they go down. And the shoulders do the same thing. They go back and forth and up and down. And the spine connecting them rotates, side bends, and extends and flexes. And it's really important for that system, that shoulder, spine, pelvic system, to do that really well. So one thing I suggest when people go running or sprinting is start to pay attention to what that feels like. Can you feel your shoulders going back and forth and coming up and down a little bit? Or are you just moving your arms and your shoulders aren't moving? Because chances are, if your shoulders are rocking and rolling a little bit, so will your hip. The hip has to have the capacity to do this. It's typically, this gets worse, but it's not as big of a problem as this, going up and down. Back and forth is something that gets harder and harder and harder for us as we age. But this going up and down is even more problematic. As you're swinging through, if that side of the hip doesn't come up, that's where we trip. That's where we fall. That's a problem. Can we still maintain the capacity to lift the hip up as we move like this? It's so important. So think about it when you're running, of allowing the shoulders to rock and roll a little bit and feel that same rocking and rolling in the hips. So that would be a qualitative thing to pay attention to.
You should do a masterclass on running. Yeah, that was pretty good.
Thanks. I should do this for a living.
I think you might have. Yeah, there's something here for you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
No, this was great. I really appreciate it. Any kind of closing thoughts? Anything you want to leave the audience with? I mean, this has been an absolute treat and a pleasure.
It's been fun, man. I'm a big fan of your work. It was great to be here. I'm a little bit jealous of your beard and your hair.
No, I mean, listen, I'm looking at your beard.
No, man,
like,
that's a way better beard than
mine. We could have
a
beard grooming podcast afterwards, because this is new to me and I don't know what I'm doing.
It's
every
really
day
good.
Like,
you're doing a great job. Really good job.
Well, we can bear it out later.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you, and you've been doing great work for a long time, and you're so full of knowledge and insight, and it was a real honor. Thanks, Stu.
Back at you, Richard. I appreciate it.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Peace.